The 20th century was not just a period of wars, revolutions, and ideologies. It was a time when powerful leaders rose to command nations, shift borders, and alter the fate of millions. From the iron grip of Stalin and Hitler's terrifying vision, to the military regimes of Pinochet and Suharto, from monarchs turned autocrats to revolutionaries turned dictators. These men ruled not just with authority, but with force, fear, and a firm belief in their mission. Some were hailed as heroes, others condemned as tyrants. But one thing is certain, each of them left a mark that reshaped the course of world history. In this video, we dive into the lives and legacies of the 20th century's most powerful and controversial rulers, and how their reigns changed the shape of the world.
We will climb. The dust will settle. We will not. All together we will rise. We will climb.
The rise of Adolf Hitler in 1933 marked the beginning of a tumultuous period in Germany, as communities found themselves swept up in the tide of his fervent nationalism and authoritarian ideology. Unemployment was rampant, and the economy was weak.
People yearned for a sense of purpose and direction, which Hitler promised through revitalization and strength. His magnetic speeches inflamed the public's imagination, serving as a beacon of hope amid the dark shadows of despair. Once in power, Hitler set about dismantling the democratic framework of the Weimar Republic. The 1933 Reichstag Fire Act allowed him to suspend civil liberties and arrest political opponents, which fueled an era of political repression and fear. Propaganda became a critical tool, painting a portrait of a unified German identity while demonizing perceived enemies. The media was tightly controlled, with newspapers and radio broadcasting messages that glorified the regime and marginalized dissent. As Hitler's influence expanded, so too did his ambitions. The remilitarization of Germany in the 1930s challenged the Treaty of Versailles and signaled a defiance that reverberated across Europe. The reoccupation of the Rhineland and the annexation of Austria were seen as joyous events by many Germans, celebrating the return of national pride. Yet, these acts of aggression foreshadowed an increasingly hostile stance towards neighboring countries, culminating in the invasion of Poland in 1939 and the outbreak of World War II. The war unleashed unprecedented devastation and suffering. Germany, portrayed as the apex of modern civilization, became a battleground fraught with moral degradation. The regime's ideological commitment to anti-Semitism led to the systematic persecution of Jews and other marginalized groups. Concentration camps became haunting symbols of horror, where millions lost their lives in the pursuit of a twisted vision of racial purity. As the war drew to a close, the once mighty regime crumbled under the weight of its ambitions. The Allied forces, bolstered by the resilience of those resisting tyranny, encircled Berlin in 1945. Amidst the ruins, Hitler's vision of a dominant Germany collapsed, ushering in a new era of reckoning. The post-war landscape was left to grapple with the scars of tyranny, and the world was forced to confront the darkness that had unfolded in those years.
Saddam Hussein emerged from the dusty streets of Tikrit, where his early life was shaped by poverty and strife. His ambition ignited during his teenage years as he joined the Ba'ath Party, a group advocating Arab nationalism and socialism. His rise began in the late 1950s, when he played a vital role in the coup that toppled the monarchy in Iraq. As he climbed the ranks, he became known for his ruthlessness and cunning, firmly establishing himself as a key player in the party and, ultimately, the leader of Iraq. In 1979, Saddam formally seized power, declaring himself president. Under his regime, Iraq underwent significant modernization and industrialization, with oil revenues fueling infrastructure projects and military expansion. The nation's pride surged as Saddam positioned himself as a champion of the Arab cause, particularly after the Iranian Revolution in 1979 ignited regional tensions. The war with Iran, lasting from 1980 to 1988, showcased his willingness to expend immense resources and lives to protect his regime and assert Iraq's dominance. However, this conflict drained Iraq's economy, setting the stage for future turmoil. The Gulf War of 1990 marked a pivotal moment in Saddam's reign as his forces invaded Kuwait, aiming to annex its rich oil reserves. The world united against him, leading to a massive military coalition spearheaded by the United States. The swift defeat of Iraq in 1991 culminated in crippling sanctions that suffocated the nation's economy and deepened the suffering of its citizens. As international isolation tightened, Saddam's grip tightened domestically, marked by brutal repression of dissent and violent crackdowns on opposition. His initial rise to power transformed into a desperate struggle for survival as months turned into years, ultimately leading to the infamous invasion of Iraq in 2003 by U.S. forces. In the aftermath of his overthrow, Saddam was captured and put on trial. His execution in December 2006 marked the end of his tumultuous rule, yet his legacy remains a bitter chapter in Iraqi history. The environment of fear he cultivated left an indelible mark on the nation, raising questions about governance, human rights, and the path toward recovery. The rise and fall of Saddam Hussein serve as a stark reminder of the complexities of power, the fragility of states, and the enduring consequences of leadership that is entrenched in oppression. Nicolae Ceausescu's dictatorship over Romania from 1965 to 1989 marked a brutal chapter in Eastern European history, characterized by extreme repression and a distorted cult of personality. Rising to power after the death of Gheorghe George, he quickly established himself as a formidable leader, assuming the role of General Secretary of the Romanian Communist Party. By 1974, he had consolidated his power further by creating the presidency of Romania and appointing himself, marking the beginning of an oppressive regime that would stifle dissent and suppress freedom. In the early years of his reign, Ceausescu enjoyed a modicum of popularity. His refusal to partake in the Soviet-led invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968 earned him respect on the international stage, and Romania pursued an independent foreign policy that attracted Western support. The illusion of progress was, however, short-lived. As the 1970s unfolded, Ceausescu's regime morphed into a Stalinist nightmare, with an intense cult of personality that painted him as the infallible genius of the Carpathians. His wife, Elena, wielded considerable influence, despite her lack of credentials, further complicating the political landscape of oppression. Economic mismanagement soon led Romania into a quagmire of despair. Ceausescu's ambitious industrialization efforts relied heavily on loans from the West, but by the 1980s, the nation found itself drowning in foreign debt. His draconian austerity measures included strict rationing of food and basic utilities, which led to widespread suffering and a stark decline in living conditions. Notably, his systematization policy, aimed at urban planning, resulted in the demolition of villages and historic sites, decimating cultural heritage in favor of uniform housing projects. By late 1989, as the winds of change swept across Eastern Europe, popular dissent surged in Romania, relocating to Timișoara as the epicenter of revolution. Ceausescu's isolation from the public and the international community was palpable, culminating in violent crackdowns on protests. In December 1989, he ordered brutal repression against demonstrators, but the army's defection symbolized a turning tide. His desperate flight on December 22nd ended with capture, leading to a swift trial and execution on Christmas Day. Ceausescu left behind a tarnished legacy, leaving Romania economically shattered and psychologically scarred, forever remembered as one of the Cold War's most tyrannical leaders, whose reign epitomized the folly of absolute power. Slobodan Milosevic's ascension to power marked a pivotal era in the tumultuous history of the Balkans. Emerging as a prominent figure within the Serbian Communist Party, he cultivated a nationalist persona that resonated with the populace, particularly regarding the contentious status of Kosovo. His ability to harness the frustrations and aspirations of the Serbian people contributed significantly to his rapid climb through the political ranks, setting the stage for his later leadership as President of Serbia. The decade of the 1990s heralded the Yugoslav Wars, a grim chapter in which Milosevic played an instrumental role. With a fervent commitment to Serbian interests, he became embroiled in conflicts that erupted across Croatia, Bosnia, and Kosovo. This tumultuous period was characterized by widespread violence and systemic ethnic cleansing, actions that would taint his legacy and lead to his eventual downfall. The scars of war left deep divisions and trauma in the region, reshaping the identities and politics of its people. As international outrage grew over the atrocities committed during the wars, Milosevic's regime faced increasing sanctions and political isolation. The economy crumbled under the weight of embargoes, and as the people of Yugoslavia grappled with poverty and instability, dissent began to rise. The external pressure compounded the internal turmoil, eventually culminating in a crisis that threatened his hold on power. The apex of this crisis occurred during the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia in 1999, a significant intervention driven by the escalating conflict in Kosovo and the urgent need to address human rights violations against ethnic Albanians. The bombing served as both a catalyst for change and a devastating blow to national pride, intensifying public disenchantment with Milosevic's leadership. By the year 2000, the mounting frustrations boiled over into mass protests known as the Bulldozer Revolution. In the face of widespread discontent and a disputed election, pressure from the streets forced Milosevic to relinquish his grip on power, a moment that symbolized hope and renewal for many who had lived under his oppressive regime. The aftermath of his ousting led to his arrest in 2001, paving the way for extradition to the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. As the first sitting head of state to be tried for war crimes, Milosevic's trial was emblematic of the international community's commitment to accountability. However, he died in custody in 2006, leaving many questions about justice and his complex legacy unanswered. His life remains a contentious topic, encapsulating the struggles and contradictions of a region that continues to grapple with its past. Joseph Stalin's leadership marked a pivotal era in the 20th century, defined by drastic transformations and formidable challenges. Taking the reins of the Soviet Union after Vladimir Lenin's death in 1924, Stalin emerged as the architect of a powerful state, infamous for his authoritarian rule and ruthless political maneuvers. His full name, Iosif Vissarionis Dzhugashvili, was replaced by the moniker Stalin, which translates to Man of Steel, symbolizing a leader who would mold his nation through iron-fisted control and rapid industrialization. At the heart of Stalin's strategy was the consolidation of power, achieved largely through the Great Purge from 1936 to 1938. This dark chapter saw the systematic elimination of political rivals, creating an atmosphere of fear and distrust. Bureaucrats faced show trials, and many were executed or sent to labor camps, marking a time when loyalty to Stalin was the only guarantee of survival. His ruthless tactics ensured total compliance within the Communist Party, thus laying a foundation for unprecedented control over the Soviet state. Simultaneously, Stalin embarked on an ambitious wave of industrialization via 5-year plans aiming to transform a predominantly agrarian society into an industrial powerhouse. Factories sprouted across the landscape, producing vast quantities of steel and machinery. However, the hurried focus on heavy industry often led to inefficiencies and infrequent supplies. The human cost of such rapid change was staggering, as punitive agricultural policies and forced collectivization resulted in widespread famine, with the Holodomor in Ukraine standing as a tragic testament to this hardship. As World War II broke out, Stalin's leadership prowess was both tested and showcased. Under his command, the USSR absorbed devastating losses, yet emerged victorious against Nazi Germany, particularly through tenacious battles like Stalingrad. This success not only solidified his power, but also expanded Soviet influence, propelling the nation into superpower status in the post-war landscape. However, this newfound power came at a price. The brutality of his regime persisted, characterized by mass repression, systemic executions, and the establishment of the Gulag system. Stalin's legacy remains complex and contested. While he is credited with steering the Soviet Union towards industrial and military prominence, the path was riddled with human suffering and tragedy. Thus, even decades later, the debate surrounding his role as a transformative leader or a despotic tyrant continues to provoke introspection and differing interpretations of history. The Man of Steel left an indelible mark on world affairs, prefiguring a Cold War defined by his policies and practices.